Shin Yenin and I are a well-known, respectable couple in the capital. He doesn't care that I spend a lot of money on my old love. I tolerate the countless beauties he has outside his house. But in the 7th year of our marriage, he secretly rode a horse with my mistress and broke my son's leg. Children are ignorant. Why are you acting like an adult? Don't embarrass me. With a sullen face, he pushed a 52-tailed banknote into my hand to buy my son's leg. Looking at the look of disgust on his face, I knew that he was going to die in an undignified way.
1.
Ning Ruoxue is not Shin Yenin's first mistress, but she was the first one to have a child and openly showed it to me. My son is in excruciating pain from the imperial physician's acupuncture treatment, and I don't know if he can save his leg. However, under the pretext of apologizing, she stood in front of me with a proud attitude, fiddling with the kingfisher feather hairpin on her head. Although kingfisher feathers are precious, my elder sister is the most precious among the 4 sisters, and she has given me all kinds of treasures. A mere step shaking is not even worth my attention. What she deliberately showed off was the jade bracelet on her fair wrist, which was an exact match to the one on mine. That was a family heirloom of the Shin family. When I gave birth to Shin Yuan, Shun's mother took one out from the bottom of the box and put it on my wrist. She said there are 2 of the same bracelets in total, and she will give them both to me when I have another child. At that time, Shin Yenin's sister had just entered the palace and needed to rely on my sister, the imperial concubine, for care in everything. Everyone in the Shin family was very attentive to me. Afraid that Shin Danying would lose his footing in the palace, the Shin family publicly promised that I would be the only one in Shin Yenin's backyard. Unfortunately, promises are only true at the moment they are made. Although I am the only one in Shin Yenin's backyard, women outside are popping up one after another like bamboo shoots after rain. The child in Shen's mother's mouth was born in the belly of her concubine Ning Ruoxue within a year. She kept it a secret from me and raised him until he was 5 years old when he was brought back to Beijing. And an hour ago on the polo field, a polo stick was deliberately swung at a Yuan's head with great momentum. In order to avoid the blow from the head, a Yuan fell off his horse, but the child deliberately reined in the horse and stepped on his legs, breaking his bones on the spot and leaving him in a bloody mess. Even now my child is still lying in the inner room, having his broken bones set by the imperial physician. His heart-wrenching cries are getting louder and louder. For a mother, this is as painful as having her bones scraped out and her heart cut open. Ning Ruoxue, however, came up to me in a show of force and used Shin Yenin's preference to stab me in the heart. I broke my leg on the polo field. I can only blame myself for not being as skilled as others, not my son. Everyone in Beijing knows that you, Yunheng, value money like your life. You just want some financial compensation. Just name your price. The child's father has always been generous to us and his mother, and is very arrogant towards his child. He will not be reluctant to give up this as a lesson for his child. She was just talking and showing off. She talked for half an hour about everything from the fine clothes and delicious food in the 3 courtyards in the west of the city, to her children's lavish journey back to Beijing, to her husband's companionship in the middle of the night and his concern for every detail. Shen Yenin certainly never gave us, mother and son, those tenderness and meticulousness. She had things that we didn't have, so she felt that she was superior to the wife and had one completely. During this half hour, my child fainted and woke up countless times from the pain, but because the imperial physician prevented me from seeing him. There was a heavy snowstorm outside, holding my hand full of coldness and hatred. But I'm still waiting for their son to pay for his blood debt. Seeing that I was holding the tea bowl with a pale face all the time and turning a blind eye to her naked declaration of war, she became more and more aggressive.
2.
We are both mothers, madam. Why don't you be more tolerant and let it be the child's unintentional mistake? Even if you want to accumulate blessings for your son, you shouldn't be so malicious and vent your anger on my child. Your child has already injured his leg. If he does something bad again and is hated by the bodhisattvas, he might become disabled for the rest of his life. I looked at her suddenly. She shrank back and quickly covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Alas, I have been spoiled by my husband and have become accustomed to speaking my mind. Madam, please be more understanding. However, my words may be blunt, but the truth is true. If, lady, the housekeeper ran in with a bright red forehead, interrupting Ning Ruashiue's endless chatter. Whispering in my ear, Grandma said in embarrassment, "The Marquis wants to play chess with the master and still refuses to come back." From the time A Yuan fell off his horse to this moment, a full 2.5 hours had passed, and I sent people to invite Shen Yenin 3 times. But he stayed in the Taifu mansion to play chess and appreciate poetry with the Taifu, and was reluctant to come back. He was so anxious that he took out his anger on his grandmother. Looking at the wound on Grandma's forehead caused by the tea bowl, I understood Shen Yenin's attitude. If it weren't for the fact that my elder sister had some favors towards Dr. Chen, and Lu Zhu had not shamelessly used those favors to invite him away from his mother's birthday banquet, a Yuan's leg would have probably been broken under the horse's hoof. Even though they were unwilling to maintain their relationship as husband and wife, Shen Yuan was, after all, named Shen, and he was the son of Shen Yenin. He could watch A Yuan's body deteriorate and his legs become lame. Such a cold-blooded and heartless father is rare in the world. Go down and ask the court doctor to take a look at the wound on your face. As soon as Grandma took her first step, Ning Rushua spoke out impatiently. Grand Tutor's Mansion? Coincidentally, my child's father is also in the Grand Tutor's Mansion. I came here for no other reason than to ask the Grand Tutor to take my naughty child under his wing. You know, as parents, we have to be more considerate of our children. For example, the master loves to drink Longtan Xingxua. To please the master, my husband went to get a few ounces of the rare wine himself. It turned out that 10 months ago, Shen Yenin went south to Minuet under the banner of urgency and traveled back and forth in the wind and rain for more than 3 months, just to prepare a ladder for his concubine's son to ascend the ladder. But when a Yuan was beginning to learn, I prepared a generous gift and asked him to go to the Grand Tutor to ask for a chance for a Yuan to study with the prince. However, he glanced at me indifferently. As the saying goes, a good teacher produces a good student. To be a student, one must have some talent. A Yuan's qualifications are average. Why should I beg you for anything? It is only today that I realize that it is not that he does not know how to ask for help. Only I, a Yuan, am not worthy. It's not that he doesn't feel sorry for others, it's just that the one who was hurt was me, a Yuan, so he didn't feel sorry for me. Even Shun's mother hurried over to take a look when a Yuan was carried back home. When she saw the imperial physician coming, she couldn't wait to go to the pavilion in the center of the lake to drink tea and appreciate the snow plums with her guests. Until now, no one has come to ask. But they thought that my sister had been put in the cold palace, and my crude climbing ladder was enough for use here. There's no need to play tricks on me anymore. This heartless Shen family is so boring. 3. Please send my child back to the old lady's courtyard. If he gets frozen in this windy and snowy weather. I swung a cold knife at her, and the dagger on Qingxing's waist was pulled out. Ning Ruashua's smug expression froze on her face, and she finally closed her stinky mouth in a sullen manner. The capital city is a place that values decency and propriety. Qingxing, who I brought from the battlefield to the backyard of the capital city, has not drawn her sword for a long time. But today, we have endured enough, and we feel that there is no need to talk about rules with Ning Ruashua and the treacherous Shen family. After a stick of incense, the imperial physician, sweating profusely, finally came out. Fortunately, it was just a young horse, and the treatment was timely. Although it was quite painful, the leg was saved. However, it may affect my riding and archery in the future. Although it was a pity, at least I saved my leg, and I finally felt relieved. The doctor left with my generous thank you gift, but Ning Ruashua looked rather unwilling and said to me, "It was a false blow, but he didn't really hit him on the head. He got scared and fell off his horse." Who can you blame? Madam, don't blame your child for being timid and weak, but blame others for playing with him. If this happens, which children in the capital will dare to associate with your son in the future? After all, it's just a game between children. The leg is fine. You're making such a fuss to hold my son hostage. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at for not being able to play? If you apologize to my son, I will keep my wife's rudeness and unreasonableness to myself. How about that? Only when the doctor's back completely disappeared did I lift my eyelids and take a look at her. Playing games? I can afford it the most. Then with a glance, Lu Zhu and Qingxing tacitly closed the door at lightning speed. Of course, embarrassing things should be done behind closed doors. I rolled up my wide sleeves, and while Ning Ruoxue was horrified, the two servants behind her were held at knife point to their necks by Lu Zhu and Qingxing, respectively, and they could not move at all. How dare you? 4. Ning Ruoxue had just finished speaking when I grabbed her throat. Killing people on the battlefield is as easy as chopping melons and vegetables. I'll just kill you, who is powerless. Do you think I, who grew up on the border, would dare to do that? Amid her disbelief and fear, I lifted her boneless body over my head and then threw it hard to the ground. A sound of communication. The bracelet on her wrist was shattered, and her forehead was covered in blood. The man who was so arrogant just now was now curled up in pain, holding his stomach, coughing and gasping. But I didn't give her a chance to breathe. I grabbed her wrist and dragged her back to the center of the room. When you attacked me, Ayuan, did you never think that this would happen? Finally, she realized she was scared, and before she could even beg for mercy, I grabbed her neck and lifted her up again, slowly raising her high above my head. When our eyes met, I was the one laughing this time. Do you like my game? I shook my hand deliberately, and she shuddered with fear. What kind of expression is that? It's just a game of lifting your hands high. You can play it, right? She was unable to answer. As my mouth tightened, her breathing became rapid, and her palm-sized face turned pale. I tolerated you only because I was afraid of disturbing the imperial physician and delaying my son's acupuncture. Since you were brought in, I must shut the door and beat the dog. She finally realized something and struggled desperately. Unable to escape, he kicked me with hatred. I suddenly pulled out the hairpin from my hair and hit her thigh hard with it. The silver hairpin bleeds, and she is sweating profusely from the pain. I wiped the blood on her face bit by bit. Oh, so you felt the pain when it pierced you. But my Ayuan was only 6 years old, and you instigated your bastard to do such a cruel thing to him, ruining his life. You are so arrogant and careless in front of me. Do you think your son is in my mother-in-law's hands? Unfortunately, he is kneeling in the snow. He kneels for as long as you yell. What do you think? Isn't this game more interesting? It's just a leg. I can save Ayuan's, but I may not be able to save her son's. Her eyes were filled with fear, and her body could not help shaking. A pair of well-maintained hands tried desperately to pry open my hand that had once held a knife, but to no avail. I tightened my grip a little more as she was frightened. As you said, it's just 2 legs. The Shin family is rich and can afford it. How much money do you want? Just name your price. That would be great, plus your son's legs. I can afford it. She was frightened, her body trembling like a sieve and struggling like a dying fish. Please, 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 please spare my life. That's right. 5. All of Shin Yanan's concubines who came to visit him would walk past me respectfully, holding basins and bowls full of gold ingots, and leave with expressions of gratitude. A man enjoys a few moments of pleasure in his bed, but he shouldn't pay for it with a woman's tears. What I care about is that you are easy to talk to, but I am easy to disperse. When the women who were tired of Shan Yan came to me in a nice way, I never let any of them down. If you want a shop, I will give you one. If you want money, I will give you money. It won't shake my position as mistress, it won't threaten my son's status as the crown prince, and I can spend the Shin family's money to gain a reputation for being generous, so why not do it? Of course, there are sometimes people who pretend to be noble and only want favors, not money. I was too lazy to care and let her get what she wanted. In the end, after the heartless man lost interest, I left in disgrace. Be sincere? Things change rapidly, and they are not as real as holding a handful of banknotes in your hand. People who only care about feelings are stupid. People like Ning Ruoxue, who only use their brains to kill me, are completely stupid. Seeing that she was about to die, I was unwilling to take her life, so I threw her to the ground, wiped my hands with the handkerchief prepared by the wet nurse, and turned to look at my son. Ning Ruoshua fell to the ground and suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood from her vicious mouth. She lay paralyzed on the ground like a dead dog, no longer able to move. The miserable sight of his disheveled hair helped me to relieve some of the anger that had been pent up in my heart. She wants to see her son. Take her to a mother-son reunion. Pick out some curses that are offensive to the ears and tell them to old Madam Shun in public. Remember, just pass it on, don't let them see it in person. After all, my good husband has set this up for me, so I must give him a return gift that I will be happy to accept. Yunheng, get out of here. 6. The carved wooden door was kicked open. Xin Yenin, wrapped in a cloak, stepped in amidst the wind and snow. That gloomy face was darker than the snowy sky. When my elder sister gave me to him in marriage, she told me that the way he treated me, I should treat his sister the same way. The Xin family has wealth, but no support or real power. Although my elder sister was a noble concubine, she lived deep in the palace and could not take care of me, who was left alone. The Xin family wants power, my elder sister wants stability for me, and I need money. Xin Yenin and I seem like a match made in heaven. After all these years, he still can't stand my rudeness, and I hate the smell of powder that falls from his lingering among the flowers. But in front of others, we still give each other enough face and are the most respectable couple. But today, his Xin family is in power and my Yun family is in decline, so he is unwilling to pretend anymore. When A Yuan's leg was injured by a horse, the housekeeper sent someone to fetch him. But he claimed to be busy with important matters and was late in returning home. He was unwilling to even bother sending a letter to the imperial physician. Until half an hour ago, I released Ning Ruoshua's personal mother. Shun Yenin only saw her once, then he rode back impatiently in the wind and snow. Hand over the mother and child to me. You are so lawless as to resort to private punishment under the emperor's feet. Do you know how much trouble this will cause to my mansion? Yunheng, if you don't think about yourself, you should also think about your son. No one can save you from such a crazy situation. His face was rough, and he looked furious. But from beginning to end, he never asked a yuan. He didn't ask, but I still wanted to tell him. As a father, shouldn't you ask your son? His leg was broken by a horse's hoof, and he fainted 5 times from the pain when the imperial physician cut open his skin and flesh to set the bone. But at that time, you, the so-called father, were not there. What is he doing? Accompany the grand tutor to appreciate the snow and drink tea, and ask him to take his concubine son as his disciple. He prays for a future and wealth for the child he truly loves. Shun Yenin consciously turned the jade ring on his thumb, which was his usual action when he felt guilty. I told you long ago that Yuan was not good at martial arts, but you forced him to ride a horse, shoot arrows, and play polo. Now that his leg is broken, who can he blame? I don't blame you for destroying the foundation of my Xin family, but you have the nerve to blame me for not following behind you women and children. Facing my calm, almost cold eyes, he turned his head away. Now that things have come to this, there is no reason for my mansion to use a disabled child as the crown prince. You are injured, and it is difficult for you to get pregnant again. He was so self-righteous because he was sure that my leg was completely broken. How can you be so determined? However, he deliberately delayed time and was reluctant to call the imperial physician, thus cutting off a yuan's chance to seek help. His heart really deserves to be taken out to see what color it is. Seeing that I didn't respond to him, he thought I was thinking about the possibility of his words, so he breathed a sigh of relief. I'm sure Mother has told you that I have another son who has been living away from home for many years and has suffered a lot. It would be better to bring him back to the mansion and raise him in front of you as your future prince. This will not only save the reputation of the mansion, but also A Yuan will have someone to take care of and rely on. He sighed and pretended to be sad. As a father, this is all I can do for A Yuan. 7. The coldness spread across the corners of my lips, and I said calmly, Has Your Excellency never thought about seeking justice for A Yuan? It's not right for someone to hit someone on the head while playing polo. I'm just jealous of my son's talent and virtue, which he can't catch up with even if he has 8 horses. How can you, as a father, sit back and watch your son being treated so unfairly? Not only do you blame him, but you also. I looked at him fiercely. Blood debt, blood payment. Shun Yenin was shocked when he heard this, and then shrank back on the armchair in annoyance. It was just an unintentional mistake by a child, and you want me, an adult, to worry about it. What's more, how can you ask me to handle an accident? Can I just break someone's leg? At worst, I won't play with him anymore. After all, a Yuan doesn't have the talent for riding or shooting, so it's a good time for him to calm down and practice his riding. The White Deer Academy is accepting noble children, so when a Yuan is better, I'll send him over. With his careful planning, the concubine's son will be accepted as the closed disciple by the grand tutor. My son is only fit to roll around with girls in the White Deer Academy. Since when did we, mother and son, become stepping stones and foils for others? I just tried to be a decent lady, but they thought I had lost my brain. I placed Ningrawashua's Jaden-laid swing next to Xinyan's hand. I lowered my body, looked directly into his trembling eyes, and finally asked, "So, Lord Ho is not going to make any plans?" His pupils shrank, and he suddenly started to attack. I am a nobleman, and I am competing with a child. You don't think it's embarrassing, but I think it's a disgrace to my family. If you continue to make trouble, don't blame me for being rude to you. But what if I insist on calculating?
8.
Yunheng. He met my eyes with intimidation. The crackling of the oil lamp illuminated the murderous intent in his eyes with extreme clarity. I understood in my heart that in the end, only one of him or I could survive in the Shin family. After a while, he finally succumbed to my unyielding coldness. He pushed the 50,000 taels of silver into my hand. Take this 50,000 taels, and the matter of a yuan will be over. In order to make himself seem reasonable, he deliberately raised his voice. It's just that the child was ignorant and hurt someone accidentally. As an adult, you are calculating everything, and it will only bring shame to our mansion. You don't care about your face or the position of mistress, but what about the money? Indeed, I care about money. My grandfather's by family army needed a lot of money to support it, and that was the foundation of my sister and I's livelihood. He married Shin Yenin for power, and I married him for money, so we both get what we need. As for love, he changed his girlfriends one after another. I tried my best to get money from the Shin family, but I could see that he had no money. After living in peace for so many years, we have learned how to get along as a decent couple. But he shouldn't have had a mistress and elevated her above my child, and even more cruelly paved the way for himself by stepping on my son's flesh and blood. From Shun Yenin's undisguised impatience and his contempt for my son, I knew that he, who was the first to disrupt the peaceful situation, would die in disgrace. 50,000 taels for one leg of your son. Is this the price in your mind? He was furious. What nonsense are you talking about? Now that things have come to this, what else can you do? Even if you force the poor mother and son to death, a Yuan's leg will never heal. He is already disabled, so do you think the entire marquisate will be buried with him? Do you have to make trouble until the authorities come to your door before you release him? If so, have you ever thought about the situation your sister is in the cold palace? My elder sister, the noble concubine, was sent to the cold palace, and Shin Yenin's younger sister was made a concubine because she was pregnant with a royal heir, so she no longer had to rely on my elder sister for care. So, the Shin family turned against me suddenly and even treated my son like a worthless person. He didn't even ask about a Yuan's leg injury, but he concluded that a Yuan was useless. The situation is pressing, and he, who used to be a compromising person, has now learned to threaten others. I raised my eyebrows and laughed out loud. But the bleeding mother and child were in your mother's hands. The grandmother was kind and stood up for a Yuan. I heard that one of them had his teeth knocked out and the other had his legs broken. They were kneeling in the snow in the backyard. Shun Yenin's well-defined face turned terribly pale in an instant when he met my cold smile. 9. When he reached Shun's mother's courtyard, He asked in a trembling voice. What about the mother and son? Mother, they are not ordinary people. They cannot be punished. Mother Shin was enjoying having her legs pinched by the maid and didn't understand the implication of Shin Yanen's words at all. She opened her eyelids lightly and snorted softly from between her teeth. No matter which noble family this bastard came from, if he hurts the reputation of our mansion, he should be punished. After all, she gave me a cold, sidelong glance. You're a daughter of a military family. I think the wealth of our Shin family has made you soft-hearted. You don't even have the slightest bit of magnanimity. You let that bastard scold you, and you didn't even dare to fight back. No matter how he opens his mouth or closes his mouth, his father is backing him up.
Who dares to do anything to him?
He even dares to tell us to wait for his father to come and take our lives. I am an old woman and have never been threatened by anyone, so I took his leg to see who can kill me. Shin Yanen was struck by lightning, and his body swayed suddenly. He didn't know that I had always personally supervised and guided a Yuan in his archery studies, and that there had never been any accidents. Just today, when I was taking Yuan out of the house, Shun's mother detained me in the house. She acted like an elder, criticized me for a while, and then brought Shin Yanen's Jiangnan cousin and his mistress Shin Zhaoed me. A mistress should have the bearing of a mistress. It's just a child. My Shin family is big and powerful, so we won't let our own flesh and blood live outside. The cousin from the Ning family is also gentle and well-behaved. It's not difficult to get along with her. Please tidy up Nanyuan. We will settle the poor mother and son there soon. Ignoring my gloomy face, she took the maid's hand and stood up. Madame Shun is pregnant. The imperial physician felt her pulse was as strong as a rolling bead. It is very likely that she is carrying a prince. The future of the Shin family and that of Madame Shin is limitless. But the imperial concubine has been in the cold palace for more than a year, and His Majesty has never mentioned it once. You say, the imperial concubine had so many enemies in the past. If no one takes care of her, is it possible that she can spend the rest of her life in the cold palace? She pinched my soft spot and smiled. You are a smart person. A smart person should learn to judge the situation. Not only for yourself, but also for Yuan and your sister. As she passed me by, she glanced at me with a sneer. Remember, as long as I am here, it will not be your turn to make the decisions in the Shin family. She leisurely went to the pavilion in the center of the lake to admire the plum blossoms with a group of noble ladies from Beijing who were trying to curry favor with her, leaving me, who was cold from head to toe, alone in the drafty corridor. The hatred was like a strong wind blowing in my face, making me burn with anger. But before I could take action against Shin's mother, I received the tragic news that a Yuan was injured at the horse farm. When a Yuan was carried back covered in blood, Lu Zhu also brought her concubine's son Shun Zhao back with him. With red eyes, she said to me, the young master was injured because he did it on purpose. He showed no remorse afterwards and severely whipped the horse that had trampled the young master. Cursing the horse was useless, as it failed to trample the young master's intestines and stomach. Lu Zhu didn't dare to see blood under the imperial city, so she dragged the man back and let the young lady deal with him. I only took one look at the vicious child, and I knew his identity from the safety lock engraved with Shin Yanen's name hanging around his neck. When I thought of the threat from Shin's mother, I understood everything. This child was the one they wanted to be the crown prince. So, I curled my lips, pressed the child outside the pavilion in the middle of the lake, and said to Lu Zhu, you did a great job. There is no point in dirtying your own hands than in destroying your own blood.
10.
Holding the wolf cub, I deliberately passed by Shin's mother on the corridor separated by green plants. While I was waiting for Shin's mother to come back, the wolf-like child stared at me coldly in front of everyone. You bitch, if you don't let me go, I'll kill you when my father comes. I'll send you and your bastard son to be reunited in the underworld. Lu Zhu raised her hand and hit him with a hairpin, which was heartbreaking but did not draw blood. You deliberately injured our prince's leg, and you still dare to speak so arrogantly. How can you be so well-mannered? The child grimaced in pain but refused to give in. He was not as skilled as the other man, so he deserved not to be trampled to death by the horse. He was lucky. I let him get away with it this time, but next time, I will make sure he is killed without a burial place. You hit me, and I want my father to kill you, too. Behind a screen, the ladies who were invited by Shin's mother to watch the snow gasped when they heard it. I nodded to Luzhu, and she pinched the child with such vicious force that he kicked and hit the ground, swearing and cursing. After the ladies had frowned and were filled with disgust towards the child, I gave the order. Don't disturb the ladies from having tea. Push them to the backyard and wait for the old lady to take them away. In that snowy backyard, the child kneeling on the ground bared his teeth and barked at me like an angry dog. Why do you think you became ill after giving birth to Xinyuan? That was because my grandmother deliberately tampered with your child during childbirth so that you and your child would both die, and you would have no descendants. You should have died in childbirth and given the position of Marquis's wife to my mother. If your bastard doesn't die in our hands today, he will be torn into pieces sooner or later. Make way for me. You bitch. Don't be so proud. When my aunt wants to kill you, who'll be able to save you? It turns out that those accidents were deliberately caused by Shin Yenin and his mother. They wanted me dead much sooner than I thought. They poured arsenic into my mouth, and I responded with swords. That's not too much. Looking at the silly child who couldn't hide his emotions, I smiled. It's a pity that you won't be able to wait until that day. Just at this moment, Shun's mother, who had looked at a Yuan's legs without paying any attention, came back. The child's eyes lit up, but before he could scream, Lu Zhu covered his mouth. Then he removed his jaw, and all that was heard was a scream like a slaughtered pig and a throaty roar. The ladies couldn't bear to listen any longer, so they all repeated what the child said to Shin's mother. He's still not convinced. He didn't scold the young lady enough. Now he's scolding you. It sounds pretty dirty. The Shin family relied on Shin Yenin's grandfather to donate 500,000 taels of silver to the court in the year of natural disasters to buy the false title of Marquis of Jinan. The unscrupulous Shin's mother values her reputation above all else. Relying on the favored concubine Shin, she has a very high opinion of herself and can do whatever she wants. Qing Xing added some exaggeration and encouraged. I don't know which noble family this bastard is from. If he offends someone, I'm afraid the Marquis mansion won't be able to afford it. Madam, please don't worry about it. Mother Shin immediately became angry, slammed the table and smashed the tea bowl, and shouted, You hurt my grandson and still act arrogantly in my mansion. I can tolerate this. Others will only say that my mansion is soft-hearted. You are an uneducated thing. Your parents didn't teach you how to behave. I will teach you today. Come on, pin you down in the snow and beat you up. I beat Yuan's leg the same way he injured it. A bastard son can never be compared to the noble status of a legitimate son of a marquisate. The child's mouth was covered, and he screamed in pain and despair and was beaten half to death with a stick. At that time, his grandmother, who loved him the most, lived just across a tree from him. She was so happy drinking tea and listening to music with his flesh and blood. I didn't let his frivolous mother in until he was completely unconscious. She thought Shun Zhao must have been reunited with his grandmother, so she was showing off in front of me. But she didn't know that the time she was so proud of herself and lingering around me, she actually delayed the best time to treat her child. That leg is truly crippled and useless. 11. Mother Shin became more and more proud. She took a sip of tea and continued to talk. As expected, like mother, like child. That bitch actually dared to come to my house and curse me a yuan to have my hands and feet cut off. Of course I must beat her teeth out and establish the prestige of my mansion in front of all the noble ladies. I've been forcing these two bastards to kneel in the snow in the backyard for a long time, and no one from the mansion has come to apologize or intercede. I wonder if they are the mistresses of some shady family. It would be best if this were the case. Even if I beat him to death to avenge my Yuan, no one would dare to come and make trouble. The Marquis mansion is no longer what it used to be. Concubine Shun is still favored by the emperor and has a son. Mother. Shun Yenin couldn't bear to listen any longer, so he shouted loudly and went straight to the backyard with red eyes. That's Xiao. Mother Shin was so frightened that the tea bowl fell to the ground, and suddenly her eyes were fixed on my face. I raised my eyebrows. Who is Zhao? She moved her body, raised her foot, and followed Shin Yenin straight to the backyard.
12.
The two snowmen kneeling in the snow and ice were whipped by Shin's mother's housekeeper. They didn't look like human beings at all. His face was as swollen as a steamed bun, and even though he was missing two of his front teeth, he could only cry silently. The other one had his leg broken by two beatings with boards ordered by Shin's mother. He fainted, perhaps from the cold or the pain. As soon as she saw Shin Yenin, Ning Ruoxiue, who had suffered so much injustice and pain, burst into tears. "Master, help me. My child's leg may be broken." When Shun's mother, who was chasing after me, saw the faces of the mother and daughter in the snow, she suddenly understood something, and it was like being hit on the head with a stick, and her body went limp. He staggered and almost fell to the ground. They. He only took a look at the child's blue face and broken legs, then spat out a mouthful of blood and suddenly fainted. Shun Yenin didn't care about his mother, who had fallen to the ground. He hugged the unconscious child and staggered out of the house. "Look, this is your good son. But he finally chose to abandon you." Mother Shin closed her eyes, her lips trembling, but she couldn't utter a word. I have found various excuses to send all her cronies in her courtyard to other places, so now is a good time to do bad things. With horror in her eyes, she watched me take a pill out of the box. "You're right. As long as you are in the Shun family, I will be constrained from all sides and will not be able to do anything convenient. But fortunately, it was you who betrayed me and harmed me first. So, I can avenge myself without being unjust." She stretched out the hand that she often slammed the table and smashed teacups at me and tried to grab my sleeve, but I shook it off. "I want the Shun family's wealth, and I want your lives, too." After saying that, I held her jaw and stuffed the medicine that I had prepared long ago into her mouth. "Don't worry, you won't die. After all, a vicious old thing like you should die in agony." The drug that made her completely useless went all the way down her body, piercing her intestines and scraping her stomach, leaving her in excruciating pain. The pain was no less than the day I had a difficult childbirth. I watched her vomit blood again and again until she fainted while gasping for breath, and then I left the room. "You must pay back what you owe me." 13. Ning Ruoxiue and her son were probably seriously injured. Shin Yenin did not return home for 3 days. Even the best imperial physician in the capital was invited to see him 3 times. My Yuan is awake. He didn't know what happened in the mansion, and his face was gloomy and unhappy all day long, until Qingxing squatted in the corridor, testing the poison in a Yuan's medicine while muttering curses. When the young master injured his leg, he refused to return home no matter how many times he was urged, and he was even more reluctant to sacrifice his precious face to ask a doctor to heal the young master's leg. He was heartbroken when the mother and child outside were injured, and stayed by their side day and night, without thinking at all that he had a wife and children in the mansion. The scumbag and the bitch will die in the same bed sooner or later. When I looked up, I bumped into a Yuan who had opened the window to get some fresh air. Before Qingxing could apologize, Yuan held back his tears and apologized to me. "Mother, I'm sorry." A Yuan knows about the mother and son outside. I watched him quietly as he lowered his head. Tears as big as beans fell on his injured leg and also on my heart. No matter how unlucky a Yuan was, he would not have fallen off the horse. It was because when the kid swung the polo club at me, he deliberately showed the amulet that his grandfather had given to his father. I lost my focus for a moment, and that caused me to fall off the horse. When he pulled the reins with full of malice and rode towards me, although I tried my best to roll over and protect my waist and abdomen, my leg bones were still broken. At that time, he looked down at me and sneered, saying that only if I was killed, my mother would live a life worse than death, and he and his mother would get everything in the Marquis mansion, and he took the opportunity to vent his malice. Yuan's legs hurt, but his heart hurts even more. Yuan dares not say it. Yuan does not want his mother to bear such heartache. A Yuan is sorry to his mother. The 6-year-old child burst into tears. I felt so distressed that I held him in my arms. It has nothing to do with you. The real evildoers are still justified. You are just a victim. Why should you blame yourself? But he shook his head. My father was absurd. My grandmother was confused. They were not worthy of my mother's planning and dedication. It was for me who had the blood of the Shin family, that my mother endured the humiliation and took care of my father's aftermath, planned for my aunt, and supported the Shin family. A Yuan is a sinner. It was a Yuan who trapped my mother's life. I gasped and held up his face, which looked so much like mine. How could you think like that? If I hadn't had you, I would have gone through all the ups and downs in my life, and I wouldn't have cared about the length of my life. But because I have you, I see another me who needs me, and I am willing to turn the murderous knife into an umbrella to protect me from the rain, and live out another life and possibility for you and me. Ah, Yuan, it's not your fault that the Lord has done this. Besides, the painless tricks in the Sifong mansion are nothing compared to my bloody strategies on the battlefield.
Clang.
14. The wooden door was kicked open again, and Shen Yenin stared at us, mother and son, with hatred in his eyes. So what? If you kill Ah Zhao, your son will be useless too, but you are injured and have no chance of having children. If I want, I can have as many Ruakshas as I want. You think you won? Yunheng, your retribution is yet to come. A Yuan's hand that was holding my collar trembled, and his small face, which was the size of a palm, turned extremely pale. Holding back the pain and tears, he asked Shen Yenin, "So, my father is happy that I lost my leg?" Shen Yenin frowned slightly and glanced at a Yuan calmly. "You are not as skilled as others, but that is your own fault. Are you going to be like your rude mother and keep nagging at him? Your brother's life has been ruined because of you. Are you satisfied? I see your broken leg is retribution for your mother's murders." Shen Yenin. All the blood color faded from a Yuan's face in an instant, and his body trembled like a sieve. Not only did Shen Yenin not feel any remorse, he even felt a flash of satisfaction when he saw the pain on our faces. "I am not here today to argue with you. The ancestors of the Shin family have been invited to the ancestral hall. I want to give Ruashue and her son the status of co-wife and legitimate son as compensation." Seeing my frown, he laughed out loud. "I'm not here to discuss this with you, but to inform you. My Shin family cannot be destroyed by the two of you." He turned and walked away, and the flying snow quickly covered his back. A Yuan looked up and trembled as he said, "If mother feels wronged, please take the money and the divorce papers and leave. Yuan does not want to burden mother." "Silly child, everything in the Shin family should be yours. If I leave, who will make them pay for their blood debt, and who will get everything back for you?" I patted his head and said with a smile, "Don't be afraid. Do you want your concubine's son to recognize his ancestry? He doesn't have that ability yet." 15. In the wide-open ancestral hall, the clan elders of the Shin family sat in a row. At Shen Yenin's request, he spread out the Shin family tree and put pressure on me with a cold face. "The blood of the Shin family should not be left outside. Since you are the head of a family, you should be tolerant. You have occupied the Shin family's backyard for so many years, and my sister-in-law has never blamed you because the Shin family has always been tolerant. Yun, you should not push your luck." Sister Shen Yenin is now used to pampering the 6 palaces, and the entire Shin family has risen with the tide. Naturally, their attitude towards me is completely different from before when they welcomed me with a smile. Without waiting for them to act like elders and enumerate my 7 deadly sins one by one according to Shen Yenin's instructions, I quickly responded,
"What the uncle said is right.
As a stepmother, I will never reject my own child. Not only do we need to bring her back, we need to bring her back in style." Everyone choked, and there was no chance for them to scold me, so they subconsciously looked at Shen Yenin. He snorted and looked at my face for a long while. "It's good that you know your place. If Shui enters the mansion, the power of housekeeper will be given to her. If you are obedient, you will still have a meal in this mansion. After you clean up the abandoned yard at the back, You can move in and chant sutras and pray for the Shin family's children and grandchildren. If I don't obey, will you kill me? I laughed at him for overestimating his own abilities. He was full of pride and opened the family tree, but just as he held the pen in his hand, the housekeeper rushed in. My lord, it's bad. 3 pairs of mother and son have come to the mansion. All of them are blocking the gate, claiming to bring their children back to their ancestors. Now, the gate of the mansion is surrounded by people. Those women are all old acquaintances of yours. What? Shin Yenen's pen fell to the ground. But the mother and son outside the door refused to enter the Shin family's gate. They stood in front of everyone and cried weakly. The Marquis family is so high that we might disappear without anyone noticing if we enter. We don't want anything else but an explanation from the Marquis. They refused to leave until Shin Yenen went out. Holding the banknotes I gave them, they cried and recounted their past love affairs with Shin Yenen. Afraid that the onlookers would not believe them, they even pretended to be vague about the red mole on Shin Yenen's butt, the birthmark on her lower back, and her favorite posture, but actually told them all openly. The ashamed butler was forced into a corner and stomped his feet and told the whole story in front of all the elders. They were all raised by the Marquis for a period of time, and they all have evidence to prove that they were in love with the Marquis. Shin Yenen's murderous eyes fell on my face. I brushed my sleeves and replied with a smile. Those are all my children? Since you want to acknowledge my ancestors, then just acknowledge them all. As my uncle said, it is my duty and responsibility to have more children. This way, I have fulfilled my duty and responsibility. Shin Yenen was so angry that he was shaking all over. Before he could point his hand at my face, I said, if you don't cover their mouths as soon as possible, I'm afraid that this family tradition will be reported to the emperor by the censors and will ruin concubine Shin's future. Everyone's faces turned pale, and they no longer had the arrogance they had just now. They all started to urge Shin Yenen to deal with the mess outside. One concubine could be covered up with an excuse, but the appearance of 4 concubines at the same time can only mean that the Shin family's family tradition is corrupt and Shin Yenen has low character. But the 3 women were justified. We are all the Marquis women. She can bring her children back to her ancestral home and enjoy the wealth of the Marquis's mansion. Why can't we do the same? Oh, so the child looks like the Marquis, so he is right? Then look at my child. His beautiful eyes are like those of the Marquis. Aren't they carved out of the same mold as the Marquis? Forget about her child. Look at my child. He has long legs and fair skin. He must take after his father. It's hard to say about mine. After all, it's not good to show the birthmark on my butt in public. The Marquis's nanny will know it at a glance. The 3 women who were kept by Shin Yenen for a year or so and then discarded like worn-out shoes, once stopped Shin Yenen's carriage to ask for a legitimate status, but all they got was naked humiliation and ruthless abandonment. In the end, I was the one who gave them a way out with the money. When people heard that Shin Yenen was in trouble, naturally everyone came to support him, and anyone who could help him would definitely step in with both feet. Overnight, several children showed up from nowhere, all wanting to return to their ancestral home. Shin Yenen was forced into a corner and could only admit his mistake. The Shin family has a good tradition. We have never had a concubine, and we would never allow a concubine's son to enter the house. If you continue to make trouble, don't blame me for reporting to the police. Old Madam Shin, who was lying on the bed, vomited blood for a while and tortured Shin Yenen so much that he was almost dead in the middle of the night.
16.
Sitting in a private room of a restaurant, 3 people raised their teacups to toast me. When you used your status as the mistress to give us money before, we were still unwilling. We hated you for taking advantage of someone in the palace to dominate us and monopolize Shin Yenen's backyard. But later we realized that we couldn't survive in such a dangerous place by just enjoying ourselves on the bed. Fortunately, the money you gave us was enough, and we stopped the loss in time. For the sake of the money, we were able to save some heartache for a few days. I also listened to your alternative plan and found that I am doing well. Now I can take this opportunity to give Shin Yenen a kick, which can be considered as a great relief. Respect your sobriety, respect our freedom, and respect Shin Yenin for what he deserves. As the candlelight flickered, I saw a vitality and contentment on their faces, which was completely different from the hesitation and timidity of the past. The sky is high and the sea is vast. We should not confine ourselves to a small world and allow the current predicament to imprison us for the rest of our lives. Jump out bravely, and you will see a whole new world. After eating and drinking, they left the capital overnight. After all, Shin Yenin is stingy, and he will definitely come up with a plan quickly and attack us unexpectedly. Being able to help me at this moment is already a rare act of loyalty on the part of a woman. I cannot put them in danger again. The dark and oppressive sky looks like a violent storm is about to come. Watching the three-horse carriage disappear into the deserted street, I tightened my clothes and whispered to the invisible figure, "I am really happy for you that you are living such a comfortable life. I wish you a smooth journey and a happy rest of your life." The next afternoon, heavy snow covered everything between heaven and earth. There were hardly any carriages or horses on the empty streets. But concubine Shin summoned me into the palace at this time. The eunuch said that concubine Shin had never given birth and was very anxious and afraid, so she wanted me and a Yuan to come for her. Knowing that my Yuan was injured and had difficulty walking, the eunuch still carried him into the palace in the strong wind and heavy snow. Despite all the nice words he said, he still refused to give in. Finally, he said with a half-smile, "If it's really a bone injury, it's understandable. But we have to open the plaster and see if the young master is really injured, or if the lady saw that the snowstorm was too strong and couldn't bear to see the young master suffer, so she had to disobey the queen's order." I knew that I could not avoid the beatings that were deliberately given to me by the child who tortured me. I took out the big knife that my grandfather used to kill the enemy bravely. Perhaps my son Ayuan will eventually suffer, but he should come before His Majesty and seek justice after his blood has splattered for 3 feet. Eunuch, guess what? When the Shin family and the Yun family are at war, will anyone care that an insignificant eunuch died in my yard? The eunuch's face changed drastically. He quickly opened the door and invited me into the palace. I stood in the corridor for 2 hours in the strong wind and heavy snow. When it was getting dark, concubine Shin finally let me in. She was dressed in brocade and pearls, like a gorgeous peacock. She lay on the couch with her proud head raised and pretended to apologize to me, who was kneeling on the ground. I was sleepy during my pregnancy and have slept till now. Sister-in-law, you won't blame me for neglecting you, right? Even if I reported her unintentional mistake to the emperor, I, who was soaked by the wind and snow, would not get any justice. I replied clearly, "I dare not." She kept asking about the health of Shun's mother, the current situation of the Shin family, and Shin Yuan's health for a full half-hour without asking me to get up. Seeing that I was neither humble nor arrogant, she lost interest and directly criticized me. "That child is intelligent and knowledgeable, just like my brother when he was young. He likes him very much, and so does my mother. My sister-in-law always looks ahead, so she can probably see the future of the Shin family, right? Things are different now. The Shin family used to beg for mercy. Sister-in-law should know how to help the Shin family regain their dignity." After saying this, she winked, and a servant came up to me with a basket of silver charcoal and 2 meat buns. She raised her eyebrows and smiled at me. "Go to the cold palace and see your elder sister. These things that she needs are given by me. She should be grateful for my generosity and protection." But under the tray, there was a dagger. She was telling me that she could bring stability to my sister, or she could take her life. Everyone in the Shin family uses my sister to threaten me. They wouldn't think that my elder sister, who went crazy killing people in the harem, is a soft persimmon that can be manipulated by anyone. I kowtowed to express my gratitude with a sneer on my face, said my final goodbyes to the dying concubine Shin, and then walked into the gate of the cold palace holding those things. 17. The elder sister was wearing a coarse cotton coat, with her long hair loose, kneeling in front of the bodhisattva and beating a wooden fish. It was 3 feet of ice outside, and it was so cold inside that the breath turned into frost, but only my sister kept her back straight. Hearing my footsteps, the wooden fish paused and she said, you're here." My grandfather commanded a large army, and although my father and mother died in the battlefield, my sister was still kept as a hostage by the Queen Mother for many years. She had a close relationship with His Majesty, who was still a prince, and she even begged her grandfather to help him ascend the throne. But when he was in power, he gave the throne of queen to the daughter of the prime minister and compensated his elder sister with the enviable favors of the 6 palaces. But this kind of favor came to an abrupt end at the end of last year, when the queen suddenly died of illness. After a night of quarreling, the elder sister destroyed the Gwangju Palace and asked to be sent to the Cold Palace, where she stayed for a year. Every day she knelt before the Bodhisattva and recited sutras to atone for her sins, and she became the sword of His Majesty, killing the queen and her entire family with her own hands. A year ago, when I came to see her, she gritted her teeth and yelled at me. My child fell into the water in the Weiyang Palace that year. I want to get to the bottom of it. He held me down tightly and told me that the Prime Minister has many disciples, and they are deeply rooted. He is alone and weak and can't afford to offend them, so he asked me to be patient. I endured it, but I didn't. I fought the queen to the death, annihilated her entire family in the Prime Minister's mansion in the blood, and also took her life with bowls of medicine. But before she died, she asked me to see her. My child who fell into the water had nothing to do with her from the beginning to the end. His cousin, who was not very prominent in Yongning Palace, was the culprit. It was he who deliberately diverted the disaster to the east, causing the queen and I to suffer losses so that he and his cousin could fulfill their love. My son died with regrets, and the queen's entire family was destroyed under his thundering power, but concubine Shu stepped on our flesh and blood to give birth to her children. The night I learned the truth, I drowned her in the lake of Weiyang Palace to avenge my son. The moment he pointed his sword at my forehead, I realized that he was the one I should kill the most. If I hadn't been sent to the Cold Palace, how could he have let down his guard? Contact my grandfathers by family army while I am in the Cold Palace. When I get out of the Cold Palace, that will be the day he dies. This year I did it. I put the Bai family army's military token into my sister's hand and held her skinny hand. "Sister, it's time to kill him." She opened her eyelids, revealing the cold hatred in her narrow eyes. The eldest princess is 13 years old. I have been secretly training her for many years. She is as talented as her father and as courageous as her grandfather. How can she not be stronger than men? So, what if you kill my son? The world will still fall into the hands of my Yun family. He asked for death, so you can't blame me for making his life worse than death. The strong wind howled, making the wooden door creak. There was a fire in my sister's eyes, and she looked at me with burning eyes. The snowstorm is too strong and the road ahead is difficult. Do you dare? I laughed. Turn around and walk out. Holding a thin umbrella, he waded through the 3-foot-thick snow and carved out a firm path. 18. Concubine Shen's maid stood under the towering palace walls and watched me leave the palace in a daze, looking disheveled. They thought that I had been beaten enough and that I should take Shinzhao back to the Shin family. Shen Yenin was even more shameless. He wanted to take advantage of my entry into the palace to hide a yuan out of the Shin mansion and deal me a fatal blow. Unfortunately, he was a step too slow. Shen Yenin and I met on the narrow road outside the Shen residence. He reached out and slapped me hard on the face. "Yunheng, you have such a vicious plan. Zhao will never be able to return to his ancestral home in this lifetime." I was interested and said, "Is that so? Then shouldn't I congratulate myself?" It turned out that a fire broke out in the 3rd courtyard in the west of the city on a snowy night. As luck would have it, the courtyard gate was locked tightly and they could not escape. Ning Ruoxue and her son slammed the door loudly. This caused the noble neighbors on both sides to try their best to rescue him in order to protect themselves. But when the door was broken open, the first person to rush out was a ragged man. Without waiting for anyone to ask, he disappeared into the wind and snow in panic. The next ones to come out were the frail mother and son. One had his arm burned, and the other had a leg crippled. When Shen Yenin, who heard the news, came and held the child in his arms, Everyone could see the child's appearance clearly. He looked 70% like the man who had just fled. The Marquis was cuckolded, yet he was still complacent about raising a child for someone else. Everyone looked very happy. Shun Yenin felt like he was slapped in public. He was filled with shame and anger as he argued with Ning Ruoxiue, who was screaming, which made him look even more stupid as a fool. Finally, under everyone's sympathetic gaze, he came to his senses. It doesn't matter whether he believes it or not, and it doesn't matter whether the child is his or not. The important thing is that the child has a stain on him, and his life experience will be criticized for the rest of his life, and Shin Yenin and the Shin family will also become a laughingstock. That tainted child will never be able to enter the Shin family's door again. When I entered the palace alone, Qingxing and Luzhu followed my instructions, one protecting a yuan while the other went to the west of the city. In the end, no one was killed, and the authorities just went through the motions and then dispersed. Only Shun Yenin gave up all hope and became a laughingstock in the eyes of others. I looked at his pain, smiled and spit out a mouthful of rust, raised my eyes to look at him, and slapped him hard in the face. Isn't that the retribution you asked for? You can't stand it at this point? You want to kill me? As he stared at me in disbelief, the butler shouted, "Oh no, old lady, she died of vomiting blood." What? 19. Even though she had suffered a stroke and could not speak or move, Mother Shin was still holding on. But when the west of the city suddenly suffered such a disaster, Qingxing stood in the corridor holding a bowl of medicine and instructed her grandmother to take good care of Shin's mother, describing it clearly and vividly word by word. Mother Shin was so angry that she vomited blood for half an hour. Before the imperial physician came, she died in pain. Shun Yenin looked at me fiercely, his hands clenched tightly. "Did you do this on purpose? You want to destroy my family and make my life worse than death? You have such a cruel heart. I will make sure you die a miserable death." He broke down and didn't even want to pretend. But what does he rely on to kill me? His sister in the palace? But that day, 2 fires broke out in the capital, one in the 3 courtyards in the west of the city and the other in my elder sister's cold palace. After the unconscious elder sister woke up, she threw herself into His Majesty's arms with tears on her face, called His Majesty's nickname, and then hugged everything that belonged to the imperial concubine. The gates of Guanju Palace opened, and the imperial concubine, who was once the most favored among the 6 palaces, returned. However, concubine Shin, upon hearing the bad news about the Shin family, fell straight down the stairs in panic and bled on the spot. However, her baby was too big and her body was too weak, so the delivery was extremely difficult. The 8-month-old prince was stillborn. Concubine Shin also suffered a sudden hemorrhage after giving birth and died within half an hour. How much is destiny and how much is my elder sister's doing? I don't want to calculate it carefully. When the tragic news reached the Shin family, Shin Yenin was forcing a yuan to kneel in front of Shun's mother and observe mourning as a father. Since his son outside has been ruined, he will also take the reputation of being unfilial and ruin my son to avenge me. Why do you think I endured my disgust and married you? Now you have destroyed everything I have. If I give you a letter of divorce and kick you out, do you think you will still be able to survive in this huge capital city? He looked at me with a determined sneer. I'm just looking for an excuse to divorce you. You can get away with it today, but there's still tomorrow and the day after. We must finally settle our accounts. There were already people hiding outside the Shin mansion, waiting to kill me. If we walked out of the Shin mansion's gate, a yuan and I would be dead. The Shin family knew about it, but in order to preserve their reputation and dignity, they were eager to get rid of a yuan and me. Unfortunately, despite their solemn promises, they had not even finished writing the divorce letter, and even their last support was gone. Not only that, the imperial concubine took pity on a yuan's injured leg and specifically asked His Majesty to reward him with many elixirs. Overnight, the situation changed drastically. It was like a slap in the face to everyone in the Shin family. Seeing their shocked expressions, I curled the corners of my lips slightly. Should I, a yuan, still observe this filial piety? Everyone took a deep breath and lowered their posture, very low. Of course, the health of the prince is the most important thing. We still have some bone-nourishing pills in our courtyard, which we will send to Ayuan's courtyard later. It's good that we are here at the funeral hall. You should go back and take good care of the prince. You see, it's not me who trampled on their dignity and face, it's them who lost their spine for power and wealth. Seeing Shun Yenen's pale face, I asked, "My lord, this divorce letter?" Shun Yenen clenched his teeth and clenched his fists, but he still had to bow his head under the pressure of everyone in the Shin family. It was just a spur-of-the-moment remark. You and I are a couple and naturally have a deep friendship. With a smile on my face, I strode away, stepping on Shun Yenen's unwillingness, hatred, and pain.
20.
3 months after Shin's mother was buried, envoys from a neighboring country entered the capital. In order to form an alliance with Qin and Jin, he asked to marry a princess and return to Mabe. The eldest princess of the palace, who is of marriageable age, is now 13 years old and was born from my elder sister's belly. The emperor had 10,000 ways to resolve the situation, but he chose the most disgusting one, which was to exchange the title of imperial concubine for the eldest princess' marriage after she came of age. Sister agreed with hatred in her heart. However, I request that your majesty send Shin Yenen to the south to collect some precious items to accompany the princess when she gets married. The emperor naturally agreed. During these 3 months, Shun Yenen tried his best but failed to kill my son and me, and even seriously injured himself. Finally, he was able to leave Beijing, and he thought it was a chance for him. But that was the opportunity one asked for. The day Shun Yenen left the city, I asked a Yuan to see him off. Go see him. Remember what a scumbag looks like. Shun Yenen's gaze fell on us mother and son, lightly. With a false smile, he said, "When your father comes back, I will bring gifts for Yuan to study." What gift? Did my son and I die in the poisonous well in the backyard, or in the palace guards he bribed? His treatment of the mother and son outside was quite different. Behind our backs, he gave tens of thousands of banknotes to Shun Zhao and his mother. Unfortunately, as soon as he left, I sent people to rob him clean overnight. Even his people in the mansion were cleared out by me without leaving a single one. Those who came before us plant trees for the benefit of the next generation. I also sent a Yuan to be the last disciple of the Taifu. The Grand Tutor thought that Shen Yenen's previous flattery was all for a Yuan, so he naturally accepted it with pleasure. Half a year later, there was a flood in the south of the Yangtze River and Shen Yenen's boat capsized. Everyone on the ship survived, except him, whose fate was unknown. What I did. Ning Ruoxue rushed to me again and cried and begged me to go find Shen Yenen. I held the tea bowl in my hand and saw that her forehead was bleeding and her face was covered with tears and blood. He then gave a look and ordered someone to bring out a few broken bones. Do you really love him to the core? Then take a look and see if you recognize these bones. Ning Ruoxue fell to the ground with a thud and looked at me as if she was a ghost. I laughed. Why would I look for him? It was me who prevented him from coming back. Under the emperor's feet, it is too risky to kill a marquis. My sister is of noble status and should not be stained with dirt. Therefore, Shen Yenen must leave the capital. Didn't he curse me, a Yuan, as a cripple? So I cut off his limbs, cut off his tongue, and left him to beg in Jiangnan. Wasn't he planning to step on my flesh and blood to gain power, and then kill us both? I would kill all his relatives and let him live the rest of his life in pain with a disabled body. You love him and miss him? Here is his address, go find him. I am a bit soft on women. Ning Ruoxue is the same as me in her heart, and she only loves herself. When she realized that she could no longer hold on to Gun Yenen, she quickly changed her target and became someone else's mistress. But her crippled child was completely wasted amidst countless contempt and cold stares. Shen's mother praised him for his natural intelligence. Shen Yenen said he had the talent to govern the world, and even concubine Shen praised him for being outstanding. But what is the result? You've rotted in the mud, and are not even worthy of carrying my shoes. 21. 2 years later, at the eldest princess coming-of-age ceremony, the emperor suddenly vomited blood and fainted at the palace banquet. The royal consort assisted in the management of the 6 palaces and arranged for a round of concubines to take care of her, but there was no improvement. It was not until the elder sister came to the bedside holding the imperial edict appointing the eldest princess as the crown princess that the emperor suddenly realized that everything was planned by the elder sister. Unfortunately, it's all too late. In the past 2 years, with the help of the Shun family's caravan, I have gathered the Bai family's army together. Use real money to buy the best equipment and weapons, and you can naturally fight 3 enemies at once. The Bai family has 100,000 soldiers at the gates of the city. Whether your majesty is willing or not, my daughter will take that position. It depends on whether you let your children in the imperial city bleed into a river, or leave them a chance to live and send them to their fiefdoms. The emperor didn't believe that his sister could do that, until Shufei's 2 children were strangled to death beside his bed. The emperor, who had been a master strategist all his life, finally surrendered in grief. The emperor was seriously ill, and the crown princess was in charge of the country. My elder sister sat on the high chair and smiled at me. Once the princess has calmed people down, we'll clear away all the unnecessary dirt. She ate a bowl of tea. But before that, the blood feud of the prime minister's family should be cut off one by one at the tip of the knife of the late queen's younger sister. 22. 3 years later, a Yuan was old enough to get married. He was dressed in fine clothes and riding a horse, galloping through the streets, looking so unrestrained and carefree. The skinny coachman who passed by him stared at his back until he was whipped on the back. Then he limped forward and hurried the carriage. Who would have thought that this lame man who had become someone else's horse slave was actually the half-brother of the most high-spirited marquis in the capital? Others only knew that Manu's mother had no sense of shame. She was a mistress and was locked up by the original wife. She was hung naked at the door for half a day to be displayed to the public. In the end, she was kicked out of the house without even a piece of yarn. She has such a bad reputation. Who would dare to want her? As her appearance faded, things became even more difficult. She vented all her hatred on her only son and even sold him as a slave to a human trafficker in order to raise money to return home. Unfortunately, the people carrying the silver encountered bandits as soon as they left the capital. Not only was his money robbed, but he was also humiliated and kicked into the icy river, where he drowned. Shen Zhao was not much better, a frail disabled man whose only skill was training horses. After many twists and turns, he became a groom for the violent princess. Being whipped and beaten has become a common occurrence, and being humiliated by kneeling in public is also normal. Seeing Shun Yuan's unruly back today was like a sharp whip slapping Shen Zhao's heart. He whipped the horse's back desperately, as if to vent his anger. When he saw a disabled man with broken limbs and unable to speak kneeling in the middle of the road blocking the way, he became furious and whipped the carriage to drive straight into him. Seeing the disabled man fall to the ground and spit out blood, he did not even stop but rode away. Looking at the disabled man with his eyes wide open and spitting blood, I leaned over and looked for the shadow of the former Shen Yanan in him.
But no.
No wonder his son Shen Zhao, who had been waiting in the capital for his return, couldn't recognize him. I laughed. After crawling for so many years, I crawled back to the capital from Jiangnan, but I ended up sleeping in the open air and heading to a place where I could not close my eyes. Shun Yanan, this is your retribution. We are a respectable couple after all, so I came to see you die with regrets. Shun Yanan spat out a mouthful of blood, truly dying with his eyes open under the wheels of his beloved son. I got up and left. A Yuan was waiting in the tea house and prepared my favorite snacks for me. After pouring me a cup of tea, he said, "It's just a coincidence that a carriage overturned outside the city and broke the good leg of the slave. I'm afraid there is no place for him in the capital. It would be better to send him to Jiangnan. I have to travel thousands of miles to fulfill his destiny and suffer the pain of broken bones. Do you think it is worth it, mother?" Despite his young age, he has learned most of my tricks. The spring breeze of March blew gently, and I chuckled and replied, "Young people should make their own decisions. The The pear blossoms on the roadside are in full bloom, one cluster overshadowing the other, and it's another beautiful spring scene in Beijing.